So busy today. Beautiful day. Very nice out. So tonight, I get the honor of speaking to you again. And so I'm going to go back and look at the last 2 weeks. Because this is my third in this series. And it's just kind of I don't know, it's a loose series. But um, so we started off a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about Job 37:23. We cannot imagine the power of the Almighty, but even though He is just and righteous, He does not destroy us. We started with that, and we talked about the power of God and how awesome He is, and how much He loves us, and how He doesn't destroy us because He wants to be with us. He wants to have a relationship with us, and so that was our couple weeks ago, the 15th, and then last week, the 22nd. We talked about, we kind of started off where we were, with Job about the power of God and all that. And we talked about whether or not we show contempt for God um, when we don't show Him what, uh, when we sin because we know He's not going to destroy us. When we sin, because He knows He's not going to strike us with lightning, and so we talked about that, how we're free to do whatever we want. So we should choose to honor God because He's God, because of who He is, because He deserves it. And but we don't have to. We don't have to do it. In the grand scheme of things, for eternity, it'll make a difference. But right here on earth, right here and now, it makes it makes a difference. But it's not a God's going to strike you with lightning today and you're going to be gone type of difference. So I ended with a phrase, and this is a phrase that was said by I think our pastor said this. Surrendering our life to the Lord is the ultimate act of worship of God. And so we surrender not because He makes us. He never makes us do it. He doesn't even make us talk to Him if we don't want to talk to Him. But He loves us so much, and He wants us to talk to Him, and He wants us to interact with Him. So I thought I'd look at the worship, and talk to you today about worship. So, what do we think worship is? Is it singing? Is it getting together and singing songs that bring Him glory and honor and praise? Absolutely, it absolutely is. But there are other things that are worship too. So I'm going to start by looking at what the word worship, what is translated worship in the Bible, translated into English in the Bible. What was the original word? Sorry, very thirsty today. So in in the Old Testament, I don't know how to say the word, but the word is shaka, shaka, Shachah, and I say shaka because I like to watch sci-fi, and I watch what is that called? Well, anyways, it's a word that these ancient people say, and so it's kind of funny to me. And I was saying it to someone today, and she said, "Oh, do you watch that too?" And we were all excited because we both watched this sci-fi show. But anyways, Stargate, that's what it is. We watched Stargate, and so this word came up. That shakah is a word. It means to worship. It's a Hebrew word that means to worship, to prostrate oneself, to bow down. And it's the word in the Old Testament that is translated into the word worship in English. And so there's different ways it was used. One was an example of bowing down before our superior or ruler. And an example of that would be David, who bowed down before Saul. In 1 Samuel 24:8 is an example of bowing down before a superior or a ruler. Another example of bowing down would be bowing to someone who is socially or economically superior. They either have more money or they have more prestige in the community. An example of that was Ruth. When she met Boaz, she bowed down to him and she honored him because he was socially and economically superior to her. That verse is Ruth chapter 2, verse 10. A third example in the Old Testament of worship, is in a dream. Joseph saw his brothers, and the sheaves were bowing down before his sheaf. So once again, that's a matter of, they weren't really at that time in his life. He was not superior to them in any way, but in this dream that he saw them bowing down in the sheaves. That's Genesis 37, verse 5, and verses 9 through 10. So those are some examples of how the word is used. The word of worship is used in the Old Testament. And it's always that same word, shahah, that is used. So then let's look in the New Testament and see the word worship. There's verbs, usage of the word worship, and there's noun word usage of the word worship. So I'm going to say the words. Don't make fun of me when I mispronounce them. They're probably all Greek, I guess. I don't know. But proskuneo, it means towards, to kiss towards. So it's an act of paying homage. That's what worship is. And there's even an Old Testament reference of this particular word. Deuteronomy 32:43. It's referring to the advent of Christ. So this, was used in the Old Testament there in Deuteronomy, and it actually is in the New Testament as well. I'm sorry, I didn't write down an example of it, but it's in the New Testament as well. But it's to kiss towards, or to express love towards, I would say, paying homage to them. Another usage is sabomai. That means to revere someone or something, and it's stressing the feeling of awe or devotion. So it's kind of a feeling, but it's a feeling that you're expressing to someone, because this is the verb form of it. So you're worshiping someone, you're expressing to them, wow, you're awesome, I think you're glorious, that's sabomai. And that's expressed, some examples are Matthew 15:9, Mark 7:7, and Acts 16:14. Those are some examples. Okay, so a third verb usage of the word worship. It's shabazomai, and it's very similar to what we just had, not sebomai. This is sabazomai. It means to honor religiously. I don't get all the little subtleties to all of these. I really don't. But in their culture, they meant different things, and they were different ways of expressing worship. So religiously honoring someone, that's Romans 1:25 is an example of that. And finally we have two more. Latreuo, Latreuo, latreuo. It means to serve, to render religious service or homage. And that example is, there's several examples in this one. This one I think is used a lot more than the other ones. So serving and rendering religious service. Philippians 3:3 says, who will worship by the Spirit of God? So it's religious, that's why it's by the Spirit of God that you are worshiping. 37:42, to worship God in spirit. In Acts 24:14 is to serve, which I know there were several of us in our groups that I know that were out doing that. They were worshiping God by acts of service to others. And finally, Hebrews 10:2, in the act of worshiping, and those who worship. Okay, one more word is to act piously before. So, being before God and being pious. And Acts 17:23 is an example of that. So there's lots of different examples of these are verbs. These are just verb ways that we worship. It's a thing that we do. It's an active thing that we do. And it can be used as a noun as well. So here's what we have for nouns. Sabasma is an object of worship, and it's related to the Shabazo mine. It's a religious honor, only the noun verb of it. So Acts 17:23 and 2 Thessalonians 2:4 are two examples of that in the New Testament. It's kind of interesting that there's only one word there in the Old Testament that was used, and there's all these different words in the New Testament. I'm sure there's something to that. I'll have to ponder that a little more. Okay, a second word for a noun version of the worship. I didn't try to practice saying these. So, ethelorastia, that the will to worship, to worship, to have it in your heart, to have your will wanting to worship. We voluntarily adopt worship, and that's Colossians 2:23. And finally, the act or the noun version of worship, which means worshiping, it's triskaya, and it's almost half of the last word. Yeah, the second is ethelo-triskaya, and the last word is triskaya. So one is the will. You have the will to worship, religious worship, and the other one is worshiping. Okay, so that's enough background, I guess, on the word worship in the Bible and how it got to be translated worship. There's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a lot of different things to it. So let's talk about, I wrote down some of my thoughts on what worship is. I was thinking, worship, first of all, is kind of a state of mind. When you think about God and how big He is, and how much He does for us, and how loving and kind He is, and you think of all these things, you just, like that ethelo-triskaya, you have the will to worship. It gives me a will. I want to worship God because of who He is, and because of what He's done, and what He continues to do for us. So it's kind of a state of mind. And then from that state of mind, we act it out. We can have an act of awe or of reverence. We might bow. We might stand with our hands raised. We might sing and cry out to Him. Tell Him how beautiful He is and how glorious He is, and how much we love Him, and how we can't live without Him. And those come out of that state of mind. Worship could be anything that we do to honor, respect, or show reverence. Whether it be, like what Ruth did. Ruth bowed down below Boaz. He wasn't her king. He wasn't in charge of her. But she honored him because he was socially and financially, he was her superior in that way, and so she bowed down and honored him in that way, um, showing him respect and showing him that she was bowing herself below him and honoring him. Um, so, what does our worship look like today in the modern church? Is it a whole lot different, or is it really the same? Yes, we sing. We sing, we might dance. David did that. He sang and he danced as they were bringing, bringing the ark. Yes. All I could think of was temple, and I knew that was wrong. As they were bringing the ark back into the city, he was joyous and glorious because this ark carried the the spirit of the Lord in it at one time, and no reason to believe it didn't at that time either, you know. But he was joyous and he was happy, and so he was singing and he was dancing so wildly that his wife scorned him for, what she felt was below his dignity. you know. Something else that we might do that might be an act of worship is bringing our tithes to the church, bringing our tithes and presenting them to the Lord, saying, Lord, we give you this because we honor you, we love you. And that was something that they did back then too. In fact, God was the one that instituted. He said, the first 10% is mine, so give me the 10%. Now back then, maybe they did it by their possessions. They did it with their lambs and their cattle and their goats. And in essence, it's not a whole lot different from us getting cash, because our cash is our wealth and what He's given to us to live on. And so, and it's not just our tithes too. There might be other things that we give. We give offerings too. Maybe we have, two of one items and we only need one, and we give the other one. And we give it to the church so the church can distribute it. Or maybe we give it to a neighbor who is in need and needs it. When we do those things, we give those things. These are things that God gave to us to use and to manage. And if we choose to give it to someone else that's in need, that's an act of worship. That's an act of saying, God, I know that I don't have to hoard this and hold on to it forever, because I know that when I need something, you're going to provide. So the act of giving possessions can be an act of worship as well. Helping someone in need is another way that we worship God. We show reverence and worship to God. He asks us to do this. He asks us to, to help others in need, help our neighbor, help our friends, help our enemies. We're supposed to help others. And so if you spent your Saturday out, helping a neighbor, maybe you helped someone go get groceries, or you mowed somebody's lawn. Maybe you, we met with some, some young folks, and spent time with them and just fellowshiped with them, played games and shared a meal and chatted and discussed things and stuff. And whatever you do, you're helping someone. Do it to God's glory and to His honor. Now today we don't necessarily bow before someone or something. Maybe in the church you do, maybe at an altar you would, because you're showing God that you're repentant, or that you're honoring by saying, Lord, I need you, and I'm bowing before you, just putting my trust and my, giving you all my reverence and all my love and all my, all my being. I'm giving it to you. So we do that sort of bowing down, but on the street, we don't necessarily bow before someone. I know some cultures still have kings and queens, and they do that, and that's fine. Um, I know I don't. Can't think of anyone I bow before. Can't think of anyone. So, all right. So, acknowledging superiority, that's an act of worship. Um, I was thinking about driving here on my way here, and how people jostle to try to get to the left lane so that they can drive there, and they'll drive as fast as they can so they can get over in front of you, and then they slow down. And that just really cracks me up. But I think they want to be ahead of everyone is what it is. And um, when that gets done, it when you get in front of someone and then you slow down and they have to slow down, has nothing to do with worship necessarily, but it does have to do with respect and showing people respect, and that's an act of not showing someone respect by doing that. It's almost the opposite, showing someone disrespect by doing that. But yeah, it's okay that we acknowledge that there are people that are superior to us. I'm retired now, but while I worked, I always showed honor to my bosses, to my supervisors, and I did what they asked me to do, as long as it wasn't illegal or immoral. I did what they asked me to do, and that was an act of showing them respect and acknowledging that they are superior to me. And God asks us to do that that we are to honor those that are above us, and listen to their guidance and do what they ask us to do. And that is an act of worship, because God acknowledges that you're doing that out of what He's trained us to do and how we should live our lives. So, David, do you have any thoughts on worship? Or Kim, you guys have any thoughts on worship?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing them under the bus here. I didn't know
No,
how I
no,
was
no,
going to do
no.
this.
Well, I think when our frequency aligns with God's frequency, that's when worship culminates.
Oh, that's good.
We could go through the motions at times,
Mm.
but you may still not be in tune with the frequency.
Oh, good.
Kind of like we are God's radio receivers. When I don't know, you probably I grew up with those dial radios.
Yeah.
And you dial it, and sometimes you get to 94.7, and it's not quite 0.7, it's 0.6. It'll have this fuzziness.
Right.
And then you get tuned to the right frequency, you hear your favorite frequency that's modulated and projected in the right way. So when we tune ourselves to God's frequency, and God tunes us, we can go through a lot of motions in our life. We can go through, experiences, but are we really honed into God's frequency?
Right. That was good. I hope you guys heard that. He talked about frequency and tuning into God's frequency. We are God's antenna, and yeah, I completely agree with that. That's a good analogy. When you turn the dial, the old radios that you had to turn the dial and get right on the exact frequency. It wasn't exactly 104. It was 104.1.2. You had to dial it in to get the exact frequency, and as soon as you hit it, it wasn't fuzzy anymore. It was very clear, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful. When we're worshiping in truth, by our will, that Triskaya, and we having a flow of Triskaya, we have a will to worship, and we're truly worshiping. We're not just going through the emotions. Oh, I'm gonna stand here and wave my hands in the air, and no, we're doing it, and we're on our face before the Lord because we're just so enwrapped in Him that we just have to get on our face before Him. You know that song that says, you know, what will I do when I stand before the Lord? Will I be standing and singing His praises, or will I be on my face? You know, and there's no way of knowing. I just think that the weight of the Lord's glory will be so heavy that I'll have to fall on my face. But I don't know. We'll see. You know, we'll see what happens. But anyways, this is just an introduction to worship and some thoughts to think about for worship. Um, you know, if you have thoughts on it, go ahead and put it in the chat and everything, and we can look at them and discuss them more. But I thought it was really interesting. I would have thought they would have had a lot of different words for worship in the Old Testament. So it's surprising to me that there was one word that was used for the word worship in the Old Testament, and then there's all these different words for worship in the New Testament, and nuances for what they mean and how they're used and everything. And this wasn't all of them. These are the ones that I picked up for just noun and verb forms of it. But I'm going to go back to that. You know, when I started out, surrendering our life to the Lord is the ultimate act of worship. And really, that's the best thing of all. When we surrender our life to the Lord, we're living according to His will, and we are in tune with Him. And we're in tune with Him. We're in tune with everything and everyone around us. At least those that are also in tune with the Lord. That's where that oneness comes in. We have so much oneness in the body of Christ, in the church, in the global church and everything. We want oneness. And the way that we get there is by making sure that we're in tune with the Lord. And when they're all in tune with the Lord all around you, that's when that oneness comes in. And it's a beautiful thing when that happens. Very beautiful. It's the way you feel, the way it sounds, everything that's done. It's just so beautiful. And that's how, you know, everyone's looking for utopia, trying to get to the utopia. And man has ideas in his own mind of how to get to utopia. Well, this is it. This is the answer. Worship is the answer of how to get to utopia. By us being at one with the Lord, and those around us being at one with the Lord. We're all at one with one another because we're all in tune with the Lord. So, yeah, worship is more than singing. It's everything you do throughout your life. Everything that you do is the opportunity to worship God in the way you live your life, in the things you do and the things you say. You know, there's so many good songs out there now. One of them's called Be Kind, you know. It doesn't cost us anything to be kind. And I heard a phrase today, a mother said something to their child, something like, what was it? It just had to be with, even, oh my gosh, I wish I wrote it down. I should have wrote it down. It just was about how you don't have to always be right with what you say, even if you know the answer that's right. Sometimes relationship is more important than being right. That's what it was. Relationship is more important than being right.
Better to be kind than to be right.
Yes, that's right. Better to be kind than be right. So I guess that's what we can finish with. Let's be kind to one another and practice our good relationship skills as an act of worship to God. That even if we know someone's wrong, it's okay that you tell them truth. But if it's going to cause an argument in the moment, maybe now's not the time. Wait till later. And worship is important. It's how we honor God. It's how we reverence Him, and it's how we're one with Him. So think about worship this week, and think of ways that you can worship God. Different ways that you're worshiping God that maybe you don't even think about it as worship, but it is. And thank you for tuning in this week. Sorry we didn't have any singing today. I was working outside and doing things and exhausted. So anyways, we will see you again next week. I will be gone, but next week is Easter. Today's Palm Sunday. Next week's Easter. So happy Easter to everyone. Happy Resurrection Day.
Happy Resurrection Day.
Yes, yes. And we'll see you again. Thank you.